Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Inner Dialogue podcast. I'm your host, Lissa, and today we are diving into a topic that I am not an expert on, okay? So let's let's start off right away with a big disclaimer. So, first of all, I am not a dietitian or a nutritionist or a doctor or anybody who has any sort of credentials. I'm a high school student, okay? And so I want you to take everything I say in this episode very lightly. I have done my research, but I know that doesn't prove much. I'm going to be putting all the sources I used in the description of this episode. So if you have any questions or you're unsure about where this is coming from, you can check those out for yourself. So we are talking about something that is very, very fascinating to me, and that is the carnivore diet. So I don't know if anybody has heard about it, maybe even practices it, maybe knows somebody who is currently doing the carnivore diet, or if you've just seen it on social media. But it is basically, I would say, this sort of fad diet. That's kind of, when I looked it up, it said it was a fad diet, so I'm going to use that word just to be broad and encompass it. But it's a really popular diet right now, and it's getting a lot of traction from influencers promoting it, certain YouTubers promoting it. There's a lot of controversy surrounding it because from first glance or first hearing about it, yeah, it sounds very almost not what any medical professional would advise somebody to do. And so I did some digging and some research, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why it's popular, the kind of what it is, the sort of upsides, the downsides, the dangers, and we're also going to look at a study I found and some of the, I would say, misinformation that's come from this study and why that is, and what a better study would look like to actually kind of discover the results of that. So let's jump right in. Let's jump right into what is the carnivore diet. And I do have my laptop here for notes, as always. So the carnivore diet is a pretty restrictive diet that only allows for meat, dairy, fish, animal products, honey, sometimes honey, and sort of everything in the realm of animal produced products, hence the name carnivore diet. And it's pretty much no carbs. So bread, rice, vegetables actually are usually a no-no in this diet. And there's a range of people who practice this, from just kind of a high protein keto diet to a completely butter and beef only side of it. So it's not it's completely black and white, but I would say a lot of people who promote it online are pretty black and white about it. The more sensationalized people who talk about it are usually the ones that get popular online, so that's kind of what people see about it. And so the reasoning behind this is there's evidence obviously to support why this would work as a diet and why people are turning to this diet. So when the body doesn't have access to carbs, the body enters ketosis, so the body burns fat instead of carbs. So the body's preferred source of energy is glucose, but when you don't have access to that, when you're not eating carbs, you switch to the metabolic state of ketosis, and this is where stored fat in your body is broken down into fatty acids and then oxidized by the liver, and then that's turned into ketones, where the name keto comes from, and that's what your body uses as fuel. And ketosis is basically what a lot of people need to enter or choose to enter for fat loss, because instead of just eating and using that as the fuel for your metabolic functions, you're still eating, so it's not like you're always in a huge calorie deficit, but you are burning the fat that you already have on your body. So that's why a lot of people will do the keto diet for weight loss and fat loss. And it does have proven benefits. I didn't look at studies for this. This is what I found on Healthline, which I know is so-so. I mean, it is reliable, but it's also a big sort of company, so I don't know. So this is what I found on Healthline. So, reputable enough. The information on there is usually peer-reviewed and vetted by people. So this is what I found about the keto diet on there. And it's been reported to improve like blood sugar problems, and even people with seizures or epilepsy have gone on this diet to help with that, and it helps. And diabetes and people with insulin resistance will go on this diet because the high level of sugars is sometimes what is causing, the issues with their health. So keto diet or something with like high protein, low carbs can be really helpful for that, and doctors will suggest that. So it's not just like it's coming from nowhere and it's, made up by some random person. But the difference with the carnivore diet is that you're pretty much cutting out all carbs. So not only are you not having like bread and rice and stuff like that you would typically think of as a carb, you're pretty much cutting out all vegetables, fruits, even lower carb like snacks or stuff that still has carbs but just like a lower level. You're cutting all of that out. So it's just animal products. And online is kind of where I think this diet has gained its most traction, because there are quite a few notable names in the game of the carnivore diet. So I'm going to pull up this list of people who have sort of endorsed it. So some people online who have popularized this diet are, first of all, Dr. Sean Baker. Please don't come for me, Dr. Sean Baker. I'm just a girl. I mean no harm by this episode. This is a school project. Disclaimer. But yeah, Dr. Sean Baker, who is a former orthopedic surgeon, popularized this diet with his book, The Carnivore Diet, in 2019. And Jordan Peterson, also, hey, Jordan Peterson, don't come for me. This is for entertainment purposes only, etc., etc. He also endorses it, talks about it online, and then his daughter, Michaela Peterson, which we'll talk about her a little bit. Again, no hate to any of these people. I'm literally so scared to post anything online, I swear, because obviously I know these people are not going to see it. I genuinely have, like, no viewers on here, but something about the fact that my podcasts exist online is like, please don't come for me. But yeah, I'm not like slandering this diet too much. I hope that's not the purpose of this episode. It's just an exploration of it. So yeah, those are some key players. And also, I do believe this is not factual. I have not checked this, but I'm pretty sure Joe Rogan has also talked about it and endorsed it. So some very popular people. One thing you will notice, or that I have noticed about these online figures who have endorsed the carnivore diet, is they tend to be right-leaning. So I would say there might even be a carnivore to alt-right pipeline. If someone else wants to make a video on that, I would gladly watch a 30-minute video essay on that, because there's a link there and I don't even know why. Like, you know how like the stereotype for like really alt-left people is like vegan and like only eating fruits, and then on the opposite side of the spectrum it's like right-wingers only eat meat. Like, I don't know, obviously that's just a stereotype, but it's just funny to me. So it has been popularized by all these people, and lots more similar content creators have made content about it. The other thing that I've noticed is a rise of accounts on Instagram who promote this diet. I'm not gonna shout out anybody because whatever, like, you can make a platform on whatever you want. Like, I don't care. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying, like, those people exist. So there's one lady, again, not gonna shout her out, but she only eats, like, steak and, like, bone broth, and, like, she'll show her meals, and it's, like, genuinely the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. Maybe it tastes good, but me personally, I don't think I would enjoy that. But her videos get tons of views, tons of interaction, and some of it's negative, some of it's positive. She has like a group that you can join where you pay to join, so that gives like a slight like grift or scam energy where it's like, I don't know, something to consider. Like if someone's promising you this diet and then you have to pay them to gain access to like some group, it's like, what is the real purpose here? Like helping people or money, you know? But anyway, I have seen lots of people promoting it, especially conservative people promoting this diet, so there's some link there. I don't know what it is. I could go into that, but I didn't really research that. So that's kind of how it kind of gained popularity, is online. And I would say it kind of rose in popularity probably due to that book, The Carnivore Diet, that was released in 2019 by that Dr. Sean Baker. So that would probably be like the catalyst for it. But then also with the like rise of like, there was like, you know, the vegan diet was really, really popular in, I think like 2010, like not early 2000s, but like mid 2000s, 2010 to like maybe like 2018 would be like sort of the peak. And then I think this is almost like a reaction to that, because that had so much like popularity, and plant-based everything, like vegan everything. Obviously not like everybody was vegan, but I feel like that was sort of the main like diet people talked about, and so now it's kind of shifting. And then keto was also really popular for a little bit. I feel like that's kind of gone out and this has kind of replaced it. So, you know, the two polar opposites are veganism and carnivore, and they've kind of, one has flipped to the other in the past like 20 years. So it's very interesting how food trends are like that, like reactionary to each other. So who knows, maybe like after this we'll see a huge rise of like fruitarianism or something like that. But yeah, so a lot of people online who are carnivores will promote this diet saying like it has relieved their chronic pain, their mental health problems, they've lost a lot of fat, cleared their acne. Anytime something is really over promising and saying it can fix all your problems, I think that it's good to kind of question that, and not necessarily like, that doesn't mean that nothing can be good, but I do think that when something says it is so good that is the only answer, that's when it can be kind of questionable, because again, everybody has different bodies, everyone has a different lifestyle, even like economically, everyone has a different budget for what they can eat, and it's not ever one size fits all. Like, some people are totally thriving on the carnivore diet, it seems, and then other people probably could never even afford the carnivore diet, because it's buying beef and bacon and all those things like adds up a lot. So it's not something that I think should be marketed as the answer, but that's kind of what it seems to be doing on the internet, or these people seem to be doing on the internet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about one really prevalent creator in this field. And again, I don't mean to like hate on people. Again, like, I think that it's good to just talk about these things and like critique it. And I'm not necessarily saying these people are wrong, because when someone thinks they're right about something, you can't really just, I mean, I personally don't think it's fair to say like, no, you're wrong, I'm right, without a reasoning. I feel like I do have a reasoning, but again, I'm not a professional, so I don't feel like qualified to say definitively to any creator like what you're doing is wrong or misinformation. I do think there comes a point where someone is just spreading things that are wrong online, but I don't want to like put that out there on this podcast. I don't want to be like ripping apart people online, so I just want to use this as an example. So Michaela Fuller is the daughter of Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is obviously like this right-wing like commentator, and she is also similar in her content, but recently she's created this, I guess it's a company or a movement, I'm not so clear on that, but it's called the Lion Diet. So from what I understand, it's basically just meat, water, and salt is their like philosophy of what you should be eating. And I read the little about section on the website and her story, Michaela's story, and she basically talks about how she's dealt with chronic illness and arthritis and joint problems her whole life. And then she starts talking about how she cut out gluten and that helped her, and then she eventually started eating all meat and that seemed to fix most things. And then there was also this section about like how there was mold in her house and that was also causing her some problems, but it was because she had some genetic like predisposition to that. So basically her testimonial is like, this totally fixed everything for me. And she also talked about how she was able to go off SSRIs because of the carnivore diet and like went off her antidepressants, which I don't like that. I don't like how that is something that people are promoting, because as much as you might have like a bad experience with antidepressants and SSRIs, there are people who have really good experiences with them and has honestly saved their lives. And I just think it's like, it doesn't really send a great message to people saying I was able to get off of this medication, because it kind of gives the impression that those are bad, which I think she says, like, I think she says they are not good for you, but I don't know. I don't think that's a really good message to be spreading, because they are medically necessary sometimes. So that really kind of hit a nerve with me, because, you know, mental health is something I'm really passionate about, and I just don't think it's fair to say that this diet will fix your mental health and allow you to get off medication. So yeah, not a big fan of that. But yeah, she has kind of started this movement with people, and I've seen lots of their videos come up before, and it just makes me a little bit confused, because whenever I would see her videos or other people's videos about the carnivore diet, I'd be like, there's no way like eating meat can be healthy for you, because there's this whole like, I don't know, I think philosophy or messaging from healthcare professionals that you shouldn't eat too much red meat and that can lead to heart problems and stuff like that. So that was why I kind of wanted to talk about this, because a lot of the carnivore influencers will say like, doctors were wrong about this, like they don't want you to know that meat can't cause heart problems, can't cause cancer. And whenever I hear that messaging too, like they don't want you to know this, sounds like a conspiracy theory. That's also another red flag, so that's another reason why I wanted to talk about it. But I can understand a little bit for people who live in the US being very, very skeptical of the medical system, because it's private for the most part, and if doctors don't have patients, they're not getting paid as much. So in that sense, I really understand the being skeptical of like what healthcare people are teaching you, but it's also like, you know, you have to give credit where credit is due. Like there has been studies, there is hard evidence, and I think that it's not entirely factual to just say, it's not to say that every doctor is lying about this. And that also creates a lot of like skepticism towards people in power, which is good to an extent, because you can quickly devolve into like conspiratorial territory, which is not as good. So with Michaela and the lion diet, the way she frames it is very, very radical, I would say. I know that carnivores would disagree with me that it's not radical, that it's like the way people were meant to live. I don't know about that. I don't know about everything about the evolutionary history of human beings' diets, so like I'm not going to comment on that. But I do think anytime someone is saying that, like I was talking about before, anytime someone is saying that this is the miracle cure or something that insinuates that there's probably something going on that is not entirely accurate, or at least an exaggeration of benefits. Because you could say the same thing about like people who are plant-based or vegan will say like, this has changed my life, which I also don't think is fair to say. I think you could say even if you're a carnivore, a vegan, whatever, you could say, yeah, this is what really works for me. I've found a lot of benefits, but I don't know if it would work for anyone or for everyone. Or, yeah, this is what I've done. I've noticed this and this, and I personally just find this diet works for me. I think the problem sort of occurs when you are basically like selling either the diet itself or selling a product, which a lot of people who are in the carnivore diet space, or honestly in any really, really high control diet space, are a lot of the time doing. They're selling a course, they're selling a product, they're selling like group, so that's also something to be wary of. But one of the major players in the carnivore diet that I encountered was a study. So what I really wanted to do was see if there was any hard evidence for the carnivore diet, because we're going to get into some like benefits and drawbacks later, because those are kind of a given. Like, there's obviously going to be benefits, because why else would people do it? There's obviously going to be drawbacks, because most medical professionals, like when you look up on websites like, you know, university websites, Harvard, Healthline, they will discourage it. So there's obviously a reason why it is also discouraged. So I was looking up like evidence for or study about, and one of the major things that popped up was a study that was being like hosted, or someone had written an article about this study, and it was on a website. I think it was called thecarnivorediet.com, or actually no, it was this guy. It was Dr. Kiltz. I don't know who that is. Maybe I should. I don't know. But again, no hate to Dr. Kiltz. But I found this website that is promoting the carnivore diet, and one of the big things they had was this study, and they had this article about this study, and there's a little infographic in it, and on the infographic it says 2021 carnivore diet findings from 2,029 participants over 6+ months on a carnivore diet. And on this infographic it says 100% of diabetics came off injectable medications, 92% of diabetics came off insulin completely, 84% of diabetics came off all oral medications, inflammatory marker decreased significantly, and 90% improvement in all diseases, and then average weight loss 20 pounds. So that's obviously a very high praise for the diet, and that is like gives pretty compelling evidence as to why this diet is very successful, and like that's like, wow, that sounds great, sounds like a miracle diet. So I decided to look up that actual study that was conducted, and on this website it said a Harvard study, and when I looked it up, there was one of the researchers was a Harvard student. So the study is called Behavioral Characteristics and Self-Reported Health Status Among 2029 Adults Consuming a Carnivore Diet by Belinda S. Lenners, Jacob T. May, Owen H. Henn, and David S. Ludwig. So Belinda she works at the Boston Children's Hospital, New Balance Foundation Obesity Prevention Center. Jacob T. May is a endocrinologist at the Boston Children's Hospital, Owen H. Henn is in the Department of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School, and David S. Ludwig is a integrated physiology and molecular medicine, I guess. And David S. Ludwig studies integrative physiology and molecular medicine at Pennington Biomedical Research Center. So there are all researchers, you know, it's not like just some random guys in a basement doing a study, but only one of them is Harvard, like, medical school person. So that was kind of a bold claim. They might all work at Harvard. I'm not sure about that. I couldn't really find information on, like as a group, sort of, who they work for. But yes, that is who kind of ran this study. So when I was reading through it, there are all these result graphs. And the first thing I noticed about this study is that it has 2,029 participants, which it could be enough, but I would say for something like a diet, probably not enough, because you would want a bigger field of people to be, like, you know, receiving evidence from. So, yeah, there could be more participants. But the study kind of talks about in the results how 95% of the participants perceived an improvement of health, And the interesting thing about the study as well is that it was conducted like via social media. So there were 2,029 participants, and the study used an online survey to collect data of these participants. It was self-reported data from people who self-identified as carnivores, and the data was about like all sorts of things to do with their diet, the types of food they eat, how long they've been on carnivore. It was all people who had been on the carnivore diet for over 6 months. So that's important because that gives you like time to see the actual results of it. And it was approved by the Boston Children's Hospital Institutional Review Board. So, it's legitimate enough in that sense. And there was a wide range of participants, all over 18. It was mostly men, not a lot of women, which is also interesting because I do think this diet mostly online is promoted by and for men. And women are also, obviously Michaela has said it helped her a lot, so it is also marketed to women, but the data here is mostly reflecting men's experiences, which is pretty typical of studies that have to do with medical stuff. Men are usually more represented than women in that, so it would be nicer if they had a better, like, equal distribution. And I think the ages were 18 to 60 something, with average age of 44 or something like that. And so they, collected a bunch of data on the participants. And another thing is the data, like, obviously there was data collected, but the only thing kind of linking it back to the person was like an email address. So they didn't necessarily meet these people. They didn't necessarily know exactly who these people were. So the legitimacy of some of these people is, up in the air. Who knows? And it was a survey. It was self-reported. And a lot of the, results of the study were very, very qualitative as opposed to quantitative. So a lot of the findings were just, have you noticed an improvement in this, in this, in this, in all these different categories? And it's overwhelmingly, the results are overwhelmingly, that it helps people. Again, it claims that 95% of people had an overall improvement in health, which I don't totally understand that claim, because when it shows you the breakdown of the different statistics, it that percentage of 95%, I'm not quite sure where it comes from. So that is a interesting claim to make. It might be in there somewhere, but I'm not entirely sure. So for example, one of the categories is obesity, and it shows the prevalence in the group, so how many people are affected with that, and then whether it was resolved, improved, unchanged, or worsened. So 52% said their obesity or overweight was resolved, 41 improved, and then it kind of goes down the list of all these different things. So it definitely has the, when you look at it, it's yeah, this clearly has helped a lot of people. And then it shows the medications that people were on and if they went on or off it. So diabetes medication specifically, and insulin, diabetes, injectables, oral diabetes medication. It's many people, up to one of the categories is 100% of participants discontinued their injectable diabetes medication. So that aligns with the little infographic we saw earlier. And then another thing that I'll quickly talk about before we get into sort of some of the problems I found with this study are their sort of lab levels. And it's self-reported laboratory studies. So again, the methodology here is questionable, at least I think it is, and I'm a high school student, but I just don't think it's very accurate to have people self-report lab levels. I understand that hopefully most of these people would have accurately reported and gotten their labs done, but you just don't know. So for the most part, people had pretty standard labs, a BMI decrease, and they did have a higher LDL cholesterol, which is the level of cholesterol that is associated with heart disease. And then I believe they also had lower calcium. which is expected with a diet that's low in carbs and high in fats and protein. And then there was a couple other areas that decreased liver enzymes. I'm not gonna talk about that too much because I do not know pretty much anything about that. The only thing I could kind of give my insight on would be the cholesterol, which, I looked up that a bit, but I don't know a lot about these specific enzymes, so I'm not going to go into that. But it shows their before and after labs. Again, I don't totally understand it, so I'm not going to go and say that I can interpret that. But yeah, so in the discussion, they kind of talk about how, there was a lot of weight loss and seems to be a lot of benefits. In the study, they did find that the calcium level was low, and then also I don't know if they had this in the labs, but there's concern for certain vitamin deficiencies like vitamin C and those kind of things. But their discussion, their conclusion of the study was that there was not any important concerns related to this diet. It was pretty safe to continue, whatever. But they did put this little thing in the end that, be cautious taking this advice, and self-reported data can be not super reliable all the time. So it did say more research needs to be done, and it's conclusive in a sense that you could take something from that is very cut and dry and say these people all had benefits, but in the fine print, in the discussion, it talks about how there's obviously room for improvement within that study. So obviously I kind of went through that study and talked about the results, the findings. A lot of people reported many, many benefits, and there was pretty much nobody who reported any really significant downsides to it. When I looked at the bottom of the study at the acknowledgements, the person who helped in developing the survey and the study itself was Dr. Sean Baker. So I believe I talked about him a little bit in the beginning of this episode, but if you don't know who that is, he was the author of the Carnivore Diet book in 2019. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and what I later found out as I was doing my research is that he actually got his medical license revoked. So that does beg the question, is that somebody you can trust to be creating a study? And he did an interview. So I found some information from an interview he did talking about it. And he said that he got his license revoked because he kept canceling people's surgeries because he was offering them diet advice that helped them so much that they didn't need surgery anymore. And one example he talked about was, he said, oh, your knee is hurting, go lose 20 pounds with this diet, and then we'll see if you still need surgery. And the person came back and was not in pain anymore. So I do think that definitely would be, in the medical field, not a super great thing to do, to tell people who are in pain just to lose weight, because there's obviously a lot more that goes into that. So yeah, he lost his medical license, and then I do believe that was overturned later, and he asked to get it back, but I don't know if he did. He's not a practicing doctor anymore. I think he's a YouTuber now. So the fact that this study was developed with him just kind of shows the bias there already is. And with bias, obviously everything is biased. My podcast is biased. I already had an opinion on this. Everybody has a bias on everything. So it's not fair to say just because someone has a bias, this is completely irrelevant. But it's just something to note that going into this study, they had already been working with somebody who was not only just a supporter of the carnivore diet, but one of the main leaders in the carnivore diet. And the fact that a doctor who had a medical license revoked is one of the main proponents of this diet does not give it a very good image. And then, yeah, the main problem I think with this study, which they did acknowledge a little bit, was that it's all self-reported. So with that, there's not really a good way to check to see if that data is accurate or not. There's also no comparison group, so they didn't have a group of anybody else, either people who were just eating a regular balanced diet or people who had been on a different diet or a plant-based diet, there wasn't any comparison. So that's usually an important piece of a study, is to have a control group, and there was no control group, so that is something to keep in mind. They probably should have had a control group. And then the health improvements were perceived, and overall the participants were asked, did you see an improvement in your health? And majority of participants said yes, to like a very large degree. And not to discredit any of those people, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who have seen a lot of benefits on this diet, but the fact that these people who chose to be in the study were seemingly active participants of these carnivore groups is probably indicative that they are people who endorse the diet and people who like already have an idea of how good it is, and it doesn't really allow room for people who had a negative experience with it. And maybe there were some people who had a negative experience that participated, which wasn't actually reflected in the results. But if you see a study about, like, we want to prove, I mean, I don't know how they presented it, but if it was Sean Baker who was working with it, I'm gonna hazard a guess that maybe he said, we want to prove that this is a great diet to have. So the people who would largely participate would be people who have seen good improvements with their diet. So that is very confusing because it doesn't really give an accurate reading. It's almost like you went and, because these like carnivore groups, to be part of a carnivore group, you would probably be somebody who has tried it and who has seen benefits of it. So to recruit people off of those is like just not, it doesn't make much sense at all. I think it would make more sense if you looked at like a population in general. I don't know how exactly you would do a study looking for carnivores without using the internet, because it would be hard to find those people, but I'm sure there's a better way to do it than going on carnivore groups and saying, hey guys, do you like the carnivore diet? And people are obviously gonna say yes. This has changed my life, because they are into that, they are deep into the group, and maybe those are just the people who have the body type, body composition, and lifestyle that specific diet really meshes well with. So that's a little bit of an issue there with the sourcing of the participants. And then I wanted to talk a little bit more about this infographic that I was talking about at the beginning. So the one that says the stats about 100% of people who like were on the carnivore diet came off injectable medications. So this was very interesting to me because I looked right at the exact results. So I didn't just look at the overall. I looked at the numbers themselves. So out of this pool of people that they studied, only 16 of the 2,000 were taking diabetic like injectables for diabetes. So that's 0.8% of the study was actually taking injectables. So 16 is not even like statistically significant. I think you would have to have at least 30 of that group to prove anything. So this is a really, really misleading infographic that says 100% of diabetics came off injectable medications when there was only 16 diabetics on injectable medications and they all came off of it, which I guess you could say is some sort of evidence, but what it really shows is that these 16 people came off injectable you know what I mean? It doesn't really prove much other than there are some people in the world who are on the carnivore diet and went off their injectables. And then the other one was 92% of diabetics came off insulin completely. And again, same thing. This is a very small percentage of the whole study of people who discontinued their medication. And it was actually very confusing the way that infographic was set up, because with the claim of the 92%, that shows up in people who were taking insulin, which was T2DM only. I'm not sure what that means, but yes, it was 92% of those people who took that kind of insulin went off of it, and the group size of people who were on that kind of insulin was 13, so even less than the previous one. 82 people were on oral diabetes medication. So that at least is closer to a metric of what you could study. So 4%, and 84% discontinued their medication. Another thing to note is in this claim, is in this study, there were, within the people who came off insulin and the other type of insulin, there was actually people who also went on insulin. So they, like, newly had to start taking insulin, which is not put on that infographic at all. And then on that same infographic with the 90% improvement in all diseases, that is not really reflected in the study. There's no good statistic that you could use to prove it. It shows the table of all these different conditions that people have noticed a decrease in, and it's not, you can't really find a good percentage across the board. Maybe he took the averages, but even then I don't think it would be accurate. So I don't know. I don't know where that came from. And then on the infographic it says average weight loss 20 pounds. That one, it didn't say that explicitly in the study. Maybe it's an average. That sort of makes the most sense because being in ketosis, you are going to lose weight. Like, that's just sort of how your body works. So, I guess that makes sense. But basically, my point in this is that this infographic shared by the Dr. Kiltz is pretty misleading, and it also says study by Harvard University, which I am not entirely sure if this is a study by Harvard University. It's by many researchers. One of them does study at Harvard University, but that I think is a little bit misleading. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know for sure. Yeah, so that is that study kind of picked apart and discussed. I'm not saying it's wrong. Like, I'm obviously not a researcher. That's just my impression of it and my, take on it. I took AP Bio. That's my only credentials. Please, I might be completely wrong, but just from my sort of knowledge of how a study should work and accuracy of studies, both my parents also were professors, so, I've got that going for me. I would say, I don't know if that study can be taken really literally. I think more research probably has to be done in that field. And so if you ever see an infographic online with those similar stats referencing that study, just know that there's a lot more to it than that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the very last segment, which is kind of the pros and cons, and yeah, basically just why people see the improvements that they see and the side effects that can happen that people don't seem to be talking about for one reason or another. So interestingly, Healthline, Harvard Health, McGill, there's all articles on these websites that talk about how this diet is not a favorable one, and they all seem to discourage it. They do list benefits, but there's a pretty heavy discouragement from these larger sources. Again, bias is important to consider. A lot of people are skeptical of health organizations in the US because of the way their system is set up there, so that's all something to consider. But this is from Healthline, so there are benefits, clearly, but this is mostly due to the presence of ketosis, because that is definitely going to cause fat loss. And then another thing that people will often claim happens when they are on the carnivore diet is improvement in skin, hair, and just overall health like that, and energy levels, which I find interesting, but anyway, I'll talk about that after this. But because you're consuming a lot more protein, that is, what protein does. It helps your hair, skin, nails, all of that. So that may not necessarily be because you cut out carbs, that may be because of the increase of protein. And then the inflammation going down, and a lot of people see improvement in other health conditions, especially with diabetes, is because, you're cutting out carbs, which a lot of people with diabetes is important to have a lower sugar diet. So in some senses, in some areas, it does actually make sense, but I think the problem is how strict it is and how, it just doesn't leave room for a lot of food freedom in that sense, I guess you could say. And then some of the other benefits that they talk about on Healthline is you're reducing your processed food intake, which can always be beneficial. You're reducing refined sugar because you're not having any sugar at all. And then higher satiety, I think that's how you pronounce it, but you'll feel fuller. Whoa. you'll feel more full from eating more protein, which also can lead to weight loss in a way that is not as traumatic, I guess, to experience. Like if you just really cut down calories, that is not a nice experience to go through. So the downsides that are talked about on Healthline, Harvard Health, and McGill, which I'll link so that there is no concerns about where I'm getting my information, is that so ketosis is your body's response to starvation. So if you really weren't getting enough food in general, your body would also go into ketosis. So, I mean, it's not great. It can be hard on your body. It can cause side effects like fatigue, headache, nausea. In fact, the way to know if you're in ketosis is normally the presence of those like feelings of like just being really tired all the time. So it's the same response your body would go through if you just weren't getting enough calories, which is not great. And then more downsides are you have a higher LDL, which is linked to heart disease, but I think there is some research saying it might not be as bad as we thought to have higher LDL, but I still think that the general consensus is that that's kind of the bad cholesterol, but again, I'm not an expert on that. And then also you have a higher sodium intake with this diet, with eating a lot more meat and stuff. And then especially with the Lion diet, one of their like things is like you need to have more salt. So, I mean, I guess that's for some people it's okay, but that can be linked to high blood pressure, and for some people that is not good at all if they already struggle with high blood pressure. Not enough fiber, you're pretty much cutting out all your fiber, and then you could, encounter vitamin deficiencies. There's not a lot of vitamin C in strictly meat and dairy products, so it could be hard if you're prone to deficiencies to get the vitamins you need. Again, you could take a vitamin, multivitamin, so consider that. And then these 3 sources said they are not suitable for everybody. There's certain people with certain conditions like kidney problems who should not be on this diet for sure, like for 100%. And it's not a cure to everything, it's not a magical cure-all, but like a higher protein diet, lower carb could definitely be extremely, extremely helpful to some people. So so what I've basically taken from this is there are a lot of people pushing for this in a way that is not representing it properly, not really representing the downsides of it. And then I think the other thing that is maybe the most problematic is just the extremism of it, because it's kind of just you're trading one extreme for another. Like a lot of people who are on the carnivore diet are like, I was vegan for 10 years and it ruined my life and now I'm a carnivore. So it's like, I don't know if that's actually the best thing to be doing. I think most medical professionals would say, and dietitians would say, that somewhere in the middle is usually going to be best for most people. Again, everyone's different. There's a big spectrum of what people need to eat and sustain sustain their bodies, but somewhere a little more balanced would probably be better for most people. Again, I don't know if certain people have genetic dispositions that make them able to do the carnivore diet, but if you're just a random person and you are looking to try the carnivore diet, I would say maybe look into it a little bit more. Maybe consider just upping your protein, lowering your carbs. I do think vegetables are important. Me personally, I could not ever cut out fruit and vegetables. So, I think that it is probably a fad diet, something that's gonna fade out in time, because I think really extreme things like that aren't sustainable in the long run. But yeah, that's kind of my summary of the carnivore diet. Again, not a healthcare professional, not a nutritionist, just my own research and my kind of take on things. So yeah, I would love to hear what other people have to say about this. I talk to so many people about it because I'm very fascinated in it, and I would love to think about this more, talk about more elements of it. There's so many other things to get into with it, but I don't know, I just found it interesting. And I know this isn't super related to the social media aspect of it. I mean, social media, mental health, pop culture, but I feel like it fits into that in some ways, you know, the pop culture, social media. And I would love to talk more about the mental effects that I think this could have on people, especially like the way, you know, it's pushed on social media could cause some people to want to do it that shouldn't be doing it. But this episode is already long enough, so I think I'm gonna end it here. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.